lying on the distorted ground before her one hit annihilated him. Euphemia, looking toward the Lord, says she was feeling irritated from losing her saving skills because of a certain man who loves to annoy people. The Lord stands before her on the distorted ground, fearfully looking toward her. After this, she looked toward the castle's main door and said that she could get rid of some of that stress, and then she thanked him. Then she angrily looks toward Lord Baron Lo, saying now follow them outside this infuriating castle. Yaoganwu stands behind her and thinks she is such a terrifying woman. Let's not antagonize her. Then he questions himself, who is annoying her? However, the castle's main door opens and Lord Baron Lo takes them both outside the castle. Yaoganwu, after coming out of the castle, excitedly says they are finally out. Meanwhile, Rabbit gets there and looking toward them, says God work. Everyone sees Rabbit there and they both get scared. The Rabbit was with his man and looking toward him, Yaoganwu thought Rabbit was from the Miro computer, the Lord Baron. Lo, looking toward Rabbit excitedly says there he is, so he has come to rescue him while the Lord's hand were tied back. Youngwoo turns his head and looks toward the Lord. Stay silent and look toward Rabbit fearful, thinking he forgot that he was working with the Miro company, so things aren't over. Meanwhile, Euphemia goes to Rabbit and, looking toward the men standing behind him, asks if they are the ones he has prepared because they look strong. Rabbit, looking toward Yaoganwu, replies, indeed, Miss Arena. After this, Youngwoo stands there looking toward the Euphemia at Rabbit's side and thinks the Miro company also hired her. Wait. Then he questioned himself, why did she rescue him? Is this a trap? After this, he creates his digital interface before him, thinking about what is happening exactly. They all work with the Miro company except for him. He can't go down so easily against them. A window appeared on his digital screen about his stats and power. He read it thinking his stats were very high compared to his level. He has 4 titles, even though those are hard to acquire. Then he looks toward the people standing behind the Rabbit and thinks they have around 10 subordinates. Thankfully, they aren't heavily armed. However, he doesn't have armor on him. He must increase his attack power and defense with his remaining stats points. Youngwoo takes out his dagger and angrily looks toward them all. Meanwhile, a notification window appears before him that he has invested 150 stats points in strength, and his strength is now 300 plus. Also, he has invested 90 stats points in his stamina, plus 300. Youngwoo, looking toward them, clenches his eyes, saying that even though he doesn't think he can win, there is no other choice. Although Yoganwoo was nervous, he unknowingly became very strong even after increasing his stats. At an ordinary level, 45 total stat points should be under 500. However, once he equipped his ideal dagger, his stats points totaled more than 1300. Youngwoo was stronger than a level 100 combat class fighter. However, his experience of facing an overwhelmingly stronger opponent sprouted hesitation within him. Yaoganwu, holding his dagger, steps toward Rabbit, thinking although he will die, he must kill him too. Meanwhile, the Lord stands behind Youngwoo and asks Rabbit what he is doing. Then the Lord runs toward the Rabbit and goes to him, questioning, what is he talking about with that devilish boy? Hurry up and release him. Sees this, Youngwoo stand behind and gets surprised, and then Rabbit looks and Lord replies that he is not a member of the Miro company anymore. Then he angrily looks at the Lord and says he is about to punish him and Valmont for their deeds before he follows them obediently. The Lord becomes speechless, and then he shouts at the Rabbit, asking if he is betraying why he is a mere merchant and like an apostle of justice. Rabbit turns head and looks at the Lord. He says, King aside, replies he is the merchant before he is acting with profit in mind. Then, looking toward Yaoganwu, he smiles, saying he shall bet everything on him, Mr. Gerd. Hearing this from Rabbit's mouth, Yaoganwu is surprised. The Rabbit smiles and politely tells Yaoganwu that with his skills, he will be able to create incredible luxuries, but on his own, he will only be able to gain the full potential of profits. Then Rabbit smiles and looks toward Youngwoo, saying if he joins him, he is confident they will become bigger and greater than small and medium-sized enterprises. He shall be his resource and experience, Youngwoo thinks, which is why he rescued him, which is a relief for now. Yaoganwu replies asking, but why he is raising the flag of rebellion against the Lord and the company. Rabbit replies that because their business will start at Khan's smithy, the symbol of Winston, they must sever the hands of tyranny to regain the citizens' trust. Hearing this, Euphemia stands behind Rabbit and says, let's go quickly. They must hurry up to end this affair, and Rabbit replies, let them do that. After this, both Rabbit and Euphymna turn to leave. After taking a step, Rabbit stops and looks toward Youngwoo, saying he will inform him of the details after they have dealt with the company. He will make him richer than he could ever be. Hearing this, Youngwoo blushes and clenches his teeth, thinking richly, while Euphymna stands there looking toward Youngwoo and says wait. Then she smiled and pointed to him, saying she hoped he didn't forget his promise to craft her unique rated orb. Youngwoo replies he didn't forget, but she must get the materials and the production method for him. Euphymna stands there surprisingly, understood, but isn't he being too obedient? He replies promises must always be kept. Then he gives an evil smile, thinking he is getting a free production method. Thanks, kid. After moving, he moves from there, waving his hand and saying he will contact him. He receives the T technique and stands behind her, looking toward her. She turned her head and smiled, saying it was fun to see him again, and he stood behind, looking toward them, leaving, thinking, is everything over now? He is so tired, let's log out. Then, while logging out from the game, he believes that he can finally see a silver lining in the revenue of small and medium-sized enterprises. Then he cheers and smiles, thinking he is finally rich. On the other side, Rabbit, while on the way, turns his head and looks toward Euphymna, says but it seems like Youngwoo is terrified of her. Then he asked if something had happened inside. She stood behind, extended her hand, and closer, her eyes replied he was not afraid, he was just messing around. After this, steps ahead of him move from form. They're saying that man has the skills to defeat a Knight of the Lord in a one-on-one fight. Rabbit stands behind her and asks what. Then he is stronger than knights, and then he surprisingly says that the kid of a powerful blacksmith can't exist. And then Rabbit gets silent and stands there thinking Pagma, there is one existence that fulfilled both requirements. It all makes sense when he considers those blacksmithing skills and his strength. He is a Pagma's descendant. After this, Rabbit smiles, thinking that the day will come when he handles the works of a pagan descendant aiming for a big enterprise, which isn't far-fetched after all. However, his honorable vision as a merchant never came to pass. The Miro company fell under Euphymna and Rabbit's actions, and the company and the Lord's misdeeds were revealed to Erlstein. Valmont and Bjorn Lowe were sent to the frontier, and this entire affair ended when Erlstein ordered their executions. However, during these events, the Rabbit was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and he hadn't predicted that Erlstein would be a stern figure and wouldn't forgive the entirety of the Miro company. Rabbit stands there closing his eyes, thinking although he managed to keep his life, what a pity Youngwoo. However, he has successfully decorated a biography page for a future legend. Once the tyrants were overthrown, the village of Winston quickly recovered its original activity. However, a story in the town tells the children the whole story. And then, sitting there on the wooden bench, he says therefore, the second in command of the company, the world's most beautiful lady. And one young blacksmith brought back peace to Winston. However, the story ends there, and the children sit there on the ground and clap after the story ends. Meanwhile, a lady comes there and looks toward the storyteller. She tells such an entertaining story, and the storyteller looks toward her smile. Indeed, it is. After this, she extends her hand, puts 2 silver coins, and extends her hand toward the storyteller. She says there to tell her the story. The storyteller thanks her for the money, and then the storyteller, looking toward the lady, says that's an unfamiliar face. She seems to be a newcomer there. The lady smiles, saying they will see each other often from now on, and she requests him to tell her other interesting stories from there on out. Moreover, this story linked back to the seed from the Yatten Temple, as Erlstein appointed his daughter Irene as the new Lady of Winston. However, Youngwoo was sitting at the TV's in lunch and had his food as he turned on the Satisfy News channel. There, on the Satisfy News channel, the reporter excitedly informs the viewers with breaking news to all users of Satisfy. The very first second class of Satisfy has emerged. In the USA, the people who handle the satisfaction game sit in their office conference room and discuss the second satisfaction class with each other. The man sitting there informed the whole team. The SA group said they weren't willing to disclose information about the second class. While in the UK, the man company handling the satisfying game, his team members said he had just received the news that the user was from Mongolia. Surprisingly, they don't even have many users. After hearing this news in China, the company member says to her team members that the SA group is trying to dominate the world using the game. They must stop people from playing Satisfy. On the other hand, in Japan, the handling of the game company members says her members are Japanese persons who obtained an epic class, and she is certain the next person to gain a second class will be Japanese. Hearing this, the lady sitting in there, the meeting replies, asking her if she thinks Korea also has the potential to satisfy a Korean game they have the most users. The lady extends her hand and responds no, other than Yura, they don't have any crucial rankers, so she doesn't think they have a chance. On the Korean side, the man sitting in the meeting room says to his team members, they say that with a second class, they gain access to a wider variety of weapons and new skills and stats. However, after showing the news of every country, Yogunwoo, with a tired face, watching TV, and the news reporter also gains 2 additional stat points with each level up. Hearing the news, Yogunwoo sits tiredly and asks for 2 other points. What a cheat. The one who got the second class is so lucky. Just who is this? Also, he is so jealous. The next day, Youngwoo, at the breakfast table, says to his parents he won't go to the labor office anymore. Hearing this, his father angrily punches on the table, asking if he will spend his days unemployed again. Also, his mother looks toward him, clenching her fist. His sister Nehi sits beside the chair to him, looking toward him, asking how he can be so selfish at that age, while thinking he may be her broth, but he is pathetic. Then Nahi sighed, and then his mother surprisingly looked toward Yogunwoo, asking if he even had debts to pay. He didn't get tricked by his friends to join a pyramid scheme again. Yogunwoo angrily replies to his mother that's not the case, then he excitedly clenches his fist and raises it, saying he is playing as a blacksmith in the game, so he can sell the items he produces to make money. A great merchant said he would help him, so he might make the same amount as the CEO's salary. Hearing this, his father angrily throws the spoon on his face, shouting so he wants to play games in his room. Is that what he is saying? While his mother sobs and, putting her hands on her eyes, asks her husband, honey, what do they do with him? Nehi turns her head and looks toward Youngwoo, says brother, if he could make money through the game, he wouldn't be swimming in debt in the first place and wake up already. Youngwoo clenched his fist and looked toward his sister angrily. After this, he sits on the chair before his father and, fearfully looking toward his father, says that he gained a legendary blacksmith class so that it will be different this time. However, his father got up from the chair and shouted stop with that nonsense, then angrily pointed toward him and said, go to the labor office first thing tomorrow. Youngwoo sits there on the chair, looking toward his father, thinking no one's listening to him. This is driving him crazy. After this, in the evening, Youngwoo goes somewhere, wearing his bag on his shoulder. While on the way, he closed his eyes and relaxed, thinking as if he thought money was the problem. If he wants to stop working there, he needs to trust him, and then open his eyes, thinking, King, alright, right, let's accept Rabbit's proposal. Furthermore, with the knowledge of a large company's second-in-command and using Khan's smithy as a comfortable base of operation, he can create the result and finally convince his parents. The next day, Youngwoo goes to Khan's smithy, where Khan is making items and hammering them. He sees Youngwoo there. Khan looks toward him and asks if he is there. Youngwoo, stepping toward him, replies, it's so peaceful around there. Looks like that incident is finally over. Then he asks Khan if Rabbit has come by. Khan, hammering the item, replies that's why. Khan smiles, replaying so he hasn't heard, speaking of which he has something for him. Youngwoo, looking toward Khan, surprisingly asks what Khan has given him. A letter telling him this. Youngwoo, holding the latter, asks for a letter, and Khan answers this is where Rabbit wrote that. Youngwoo started reading the letter, and it was reported that Youngwoo didn't get pardoned due to his previous sins while in the company. Therefore, their business plans went down the drain. However, with Khan's help, he became the richest man if he used his skills correctly, and he prayed that he would hear of his legendary feats from far away. Also, Rabbit was locked up in jail. As Youngwoo was reading the letter, and after reading it, he was shocked, and Khan stood above him looking toward him, saying Erlstein was sad that a complete pardon wouldn't be possible, and Rabbit was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Hearing this, Youngwoo gets shocked and screams that no, it can't be, and he sits on the ground holding his head and starts crying. Youngwoo, while crying, abuses himself, and Khan also sits beside him and puts a hand on his shoulder to comfort him so that don't get so upset. He also has a proposal. Then Khan smiles and, looking toward him, tells him he will hand him this smithy, and he has earned the right to receive this smithy, since he protected it from the Miro company. Hearing this, Youngwoo, while crying, wiped his tears, asking what. Khan answered once he became too old to work, it would be the greatest honor to have Pagma's descendants receive this smithy. Yogenwoo sits there, putting hand in hand, thinking he will give him this smithy. He has never heard of anyone receiving a business from an NPC. Then Youngwoo smiles and looks towards Khan, saying he will believe him if he signs a contract while thinking of no take-backsies. However, Khan made the contract paper and signed it, then put it on the table, asking if he was satisfied. Youngwoo excitedly picks the contract paper from the table and starts reading it. Meanwhile, he gets the notification that he has obtained the position of Smithy's successor. However, tears of joy start flowing from Youngwoo's eyes, and he looks toward Khan and clutches the contract paper to his chest. He thinks this is a dream, and although he will have to work hard from now on, he can become the owner of a smithy. After this, Khan stands before him, fooling his armor back and smiling, asking Yogenwoo, then lets them start training. Is he ready to become the smithy's owner? Yogenwoo excitedly cheers up, saying yes, let's begin already. However, the next day in the auction house, Jishuka stands there, opens her digital window, and a list of items appears. She scrolls it, thinking they are not there. She doesn't see them. Then she asks herself why she can't find those special Jaffa arrows from before anymore. Then, looking at the interface, she thought blacksmiths generally make a few thousand arrows each time. Then she asked herself if he had disappeared after putting up a mere 99 auction. Did another guild find him already? Meanwhile, as she stood there scrolling through the site, two boys were looking at her, standing at her gossip. One smiled, saying it was Jishuka, the Tizedaka guild leader. The other one put a hand on his mouth and smiled, replaying her body's even more amazing up close should he try it. She stands far from them, listens to their conversation, turns her head, and furiously looking toward them, shouts to get out of her sight before she kills them. Both of them get scared and reply, "Yes, madam." After this, she on her window panel opens the guild chat, and after a minute of looking toward the panel, she shouts, "Listen carefully. If he doesn't find the blacksmith within this month, he will all undergo the hell training." However, her team members also get online activate the chat, and come on video chat with her there. Rigaz fearfully smiles, saying he welcomes the hell training. Hearing this, one of them tells him to stop speaking nonsense. Rigaz, no thanks for him. Then, one of them looks toward Jishuka and tells the leader. They don't have enough clues. It's not like there are only 1 or 2 blacksmith users. Jishuka shouts at them. Even if they can't do it, they must die, and then she looks toward the digital screen and says they need that blacksmith. If a small guild of elites like them wants to become stronger. Then she angrily looked toward them. After a minute, she looked toward Rigaz and asked if he loved training and where he was right now. He stays silent. All her team members get scared, and one of them, hearing this, looks toward her, thinking she is about to release all her stress. He is dead meat. Meanwhile, the vintner logged into the chat, and she angrily looked toward him and clenched her teeth, asking why did he slept for 7 hours. He will get his ranking stolen. Vintner fearfully replies to the leader that he needs to look up some interesting information he has found online. Then Vintner asks her leader if she knows Winston's village. Surprisingly, she looks toward him and asks Winston about the town next to Baron. Vintner replies there was an item production competition between users in that village too. Users of them crafted an epic grade dagger within 3 hours. Hearing this, she surprisingly thinks it's him an epic grade item in 3 hours. Even the top blacksmith ranker Panmir can't do that. Then she looks toward the screen and orders her team members to head to Winston. They ask her to wait now, and she angrily says that the last one to arrive will die. The next day at night time, the 3rd epic class Blood Warrior Cats level 216 unified ranking killed hundreds of poisoned people outside the old distorted building. After killing the poisoned pioneer, he gets the notification that he has killed a poisoned pioneer. 543 500 experience has been acquired. He has killed a closed-off pioneer, and 617,000 experience has been reached. After killing them, he sat there, keeping his word on the ground before the dead poisoned pioneer while the red aura was emerging from his sword. However, he is the 3rd epic class Blood Warrior. This epic class's attack power and duration were specialized in hunting. Katz was the 2nd son of Jun, a major Japanese conglomerate. However, his unified ranking rose at high speed thanks to his tenacity and special class effects. It hadn't increased at all this past month, no matter how much he haunted sitting there on the ground. He punched on the ground, then clenched his teeth, thinking, why can't he reach rank 1 no matter how hard he tried? Are his skills too poor? He won't acknowledge that. Then he angrily stands up, holding his sword, and thinks of his elder and younger brothers. They are gaining ground on him in their fight to be the successor. He can't let himself be a loser in the game and needs to catch up. He needs to go to hunting grounds with higher level enemies. He has enough money, so he will need to persevere using advanced potions. Then he looks toward his hand, thinking there needs to be high-grade equipment on item trading sites. Meanwhile, the notification window shows that the Armor of Great Sorrow rating is unique, and its durability defense movement speed is at good points. Then, another panel appears before him about the other item, the Black Wind Gauntlets. He read both interfaces and clenched his teeth, thinking, what production class users are users doing? After this, he opens his eyes and looks up, thinking of those lazy and useless blacksmiths, and then he screams. 1 month later, Frontier, the capital city of the Steim Earldom Euphemia, was also in deep thought. She stands outside the auction house with folded arms, says there are none there either, and she can't seem to find production methods for orbs. After this, standing outside there, she squeezes her eyes, thinking it's so difficult to find production methods for high-grade items, even though she has been looking for a month. Then she moved from there, talking to herself. She did get 6,000 plus gold for clearing the quest, but can't find uses for it. While on the way, suddenly she stopped and looked up, then she again squeezed her eyes and stood there, telling herself not only was she feeling annoyed, but now it was also unpleasant. And then, looking up toward the roof side, she says reveal himself. She already knows he is there. While looking up, she thinks her detection skills are quite high, thanks to her class traits. But she is getting monitored even though she didn't reveal her name on the ranking list as a secret ranker. This is first, who could it be? Then, looking up toward the corridor, she says she told him to come out. The boy named Faker Tizedaka, a guild member assassin who ranks no one wearing a cloak and folded arms, hid behind the pillar, and she stood on the ground looking up. He stands behind the pillar, folding his arms, thinking a single blacksmith detected his presence, which isn't impossible. Meanwhile, a window notification appears before him. That doesn't kid himself. He got caught, Faker. Reading the notification, he gets silent while 2 more members stand far behind. The pillars above him laugh at him, saying their TZK guild's reputation is crying because of him now, and it looks like he lost his touch after reaching rank no one among assassins. Faker angrily looks toward them both, is silent, and doesn't respond. Then looking toward Euphemia, he thinks after receiving information about the item competition. All their guild members are gathering right now. Thanks to the numerous eyewitnesses, they quickly manage to find the winner. The winner of the game is the rumored blacksmith Euphemia. However, Jishuka team members informed her that they had found Euphemia, and she answered that she would meet her in person and keep monitoring her until she arrived. Faker stood up, looking toward Euphemia, thinking he was planning on watching her from a distance until Jishuka arrived. But she detected him despite his level 7 stealth skill, and she was a mere blacksmith. Euphemia tells them to come down, but they don't respond and hide there. Then she uses her magic and attacks them with fire magic. An explosion occurs in that building. The building distorted, and they all flew downward. Faker, jumping down, asks his other members so she can detect them. Is everyone all right? His other members safely reach the ground. However, she creates her swirl magic, saying they stop following her like a pervert, and then she uses her angel's scream magic and attacks them together. Her magic sound creates a wavy sound in their ears, and their eardrums burst with the sound of magic, and blood starts pouring out of their ears. Faker, putting their hand on his ear, thinks, how can a blacksmith use top-level magic? Then he asks himself if he is not the blacksmith they seek. It's a trap laid by a guild that is also going after the special Jaffa Arrow creator. They are trying to deter them by using fake news as the blood flows from Faker's ears, and he sweats, thinking the item competition may have been made up from the start their Tsadaka guild was tricked. After this, Faker angrily looks toward Euphemia and asks if she got them this time and what guild she is part of while his members stand behind him crying, putting hands on their ears. Euphemia asks him in return. Then she sighs and squeezes her eyes, asking why are all the men she meets these days psychopaths. However, she creates her lightning magic and attacks them, saying monitoring and now threats. She is sick of them all. She attacks them with magic, and Faker stands there and surprisingly says such power without chanting. What a shocker. Then he creates the magic shelter before him, replaying her, but it is useless against him. She sees this, and she gets speechless while using her lightning magic. However, he attacked her, hit his leg on her stomach, and pulled her away. While falling away, she could hardly save herself and sat there on the ground on her knees. Sitting there, she thinks the first time she got his by a user after becoming a duplicator, but this man is strong. As he stands before him regarding this, he divides himself into many numbers, and they all jump up before her to attack her, saying it's over. She gets scared while they all jump toward her, holding their sword. However, she creates the shelter on her with her magic, and they all fall on her magic shelter and then fall. Moreover, Faker gets into his original form and jumps on the ground holding his weapon. Surprisingly, he asks how she eliminated his clones with one hit and what she did. Therefore, Euphemia, using her ancient queen's night magic, calls the familiar there. This normal was huge seeing him. Faker fearfully thought. She friendly summoned a familiar even though she isn't a summoner. That's impossible. After this, the standard attack on Faker, but in time he jumps and saves himself from the normal attack. The usual ran behind the Faker to attack, but he kept running. The familiar hit him and fell away. As soon as the standard attack on him hit the ground, it distorted too. Faker jumped away, thinking what destructive power. While running away, he thinks a knight is the worst matchup to an assassin who mainly fights using stealth. After this, he stands far from them and throws his arrow knives toward her, thinking if he can't resist the knight head-on as he throws the knives at her, he will aim for the real body and see if her defensive magic is just as good as Euphemia. Her familiar stands behind her, and as the knives get near her, she quickly clones herself and creates the magic swirl. He stands far from her, thinking those are explosive flying knives that reach magic begone. But she creates her magic and again clones herself while the passes pass over her. Sees this, Faker stands there surprised, thinking it is an assassin's skill, but how she stands there between her clones, she feels she has gathered a lot of Ranker's skills. She is currently at her strongest while looking for her orb's production method. She attacked him with her magic and threw him away. Also, he got a little injured as he was slipping away. His companion got there shouting, "Don't fight alone. They will help him," and he turned his head, looking toward what they were. However, his team members get there, but she attacks them all with her flame magic, and they all fall away. One falling away says they can't approach her because of that familiarity. After this, she creates her dragon claws, throws the huge fireball toward them, and attacks them. They all fall away injured. Faker lying on the ground, head up, saying this is impossible. She has an overwhelming advantage even against 4 high rankers. While Euphemia stands there, her magic and her eyes start to glow. Looking toward her, Fake thinks she is like the absolute power they have dreamt of. However, she attacked them with her flame storm magic, and he sat there on the ground injured, clenched his teeth, thinking how disgraceful. Moreover, the explosion occurs, the ground gets distorted and cracks, and the sand dust spreads everywhere. Meanwhile, Jishuka and her companion get there and see the destruction. She stands there with her companions and surprisingly says everything's gone. Just who were they fighting against? One of her companions stood beside her, looking toward her, and said she single-handedly defeated 4 guild members, including Faker. She used all kinds of skills from different classes. Hearing this, Jishuka thinks she might be a user with a hidden class, then she clenches her fist, asking her to lay her hand on their guild. To rule as the strongest guild, they can't look feeble. Then, while creating her magic, she raises her voice and orders her companions to find her immediately. She will annihilate her and her backers. However, the next day in Khan's smithy, Yaognwu continued as he was hammered items. He stood aside and asked why he didn't take a break. Then Khan, wiping his sweat with a towel, asks him if he doesn't get tired. Yaognwu, hammering the road, thinks, well, he guessed. He has been beating non-stop for a month, but he realized a few things thanks to that. After this, he put that item in a furnace blast, heated it, and then put it on the railroad with the tong, thinking first if he keeps producing the same item repeatedly, he doesn't get as much experience. Furthermore, he thinks there are 2 conditions to craft high-grade items. He uses high-quality materials successfully, and spend a lot of time and effort using average materials and dealing with heavy ore. Agility isn't the only important stat. He needs to have high strength and stamina as well. After making some items like armor, sword, and shield, he sat on the bench and wiped his sweat with a towel, asking if he should rest a bit. After this, he uses his digital skills and the interface appears before him. He starts searching for the skill and thinking, but his stamina and stats aren't much of a problem. Just by crafting all this time, all his stats have risen by 30. A notification window appeared before him. He read it thinking, and the production skills that wouldn't level up finally did. As written on the notification window, all his stat of a crafted item will increase by 12%. And when he produces rare items, his stats will permanently rise by 2, and his reputation throughout the continent will increase by 20. And when he produces epic items, all his stat will permanently rise by 4, and his reputation throughout the continent will increase by 80. Furthermore, when he makes unique items, all his stats will grow by 12, and his reputation throughout the continent will increase by 300. However, while reading the notification, he sighs and smiles, and then another notification appears that the legendary blacksmith breathed level 2. All the stats of crafted items increased by 7. After this, Yangwu looks toward the sword armor and shield lying on the table beside him and thinks the problem is even though he spent over 6 hours on each item. He produced a total of 73 items. Then he held his head, sat on the wooden table, and thought the only high-rate ones were 3 epic items. Then he abuses the legendary class and anuses his digital skills to get the production method D book, thinking at least there is this list of item production methods. After this, he opened that book and started reading it, thinking Khan passed a few dozen production methods onto him as his successor. When he thinks of how much he suffered initially trying to receive a single production method from him. After this, he thinks he hasn't heard anything from the kid who left to look for an orb production method. Therefore, he relaxed, placed his arms on the back table, and smiled, thinking he would get the materials and production method for a unique rated orb. Even though she is a bloody and scary girl, she brought him a wonderful opportunity. Thinking about Euphemia, he smiled, but suddenly he sweated and scared, thinking, wait for a second, if he crafted it, and it turned out to be a normally rated orb. However, he again holds his head, thinking that the idiot will annihilate him, and then he shouts, asking himself what to do. As he sat thinking this. Meanwhile, 2 men entered, asking if this was Khan's smithy. One had red hair, and the other had gray hairs. Yalganwu sat there scared and shouted, asking Euphemia. After this, the red-haired man angrily looks toward him and asks if the blacksmith Khan Youngwoo surprisingly looks toward them. After this, Khan gets there, and the man who is Khan and wants a man with red hair replies, asking Khan if he truly had a blacksmithing competition with someone called Arena a month ago. Khan surprisingly asks the guard if that is indeed true. Then, the man with gray hair looks toward Khan and asks if that girl is a blacksmith. He is asking if he witnessed her crafting something. Surprisingly, Khan replies that his questions are quite odd. She was an excellent blacksmith. Then Khan asks who on earth is they to barge in and questions them about her. The man with red hair angrily looks toward Khan and asks if the Miro Company and the only other party involved in this competition. Then he asked if there was anyone else who was suspicious. Then the man with gray hair angrily asked Khan, and the older man answered them already. He will gain nothing by buying time to think. Hearing this, Yaoganwu believes something is wrong with their attitude and abuses them in his head. Then Yaoganwu thinks he may be an NPC, but Khan is a person with emotions and memories. He is their grandfather's age, so how could they? However, Youngwoo raises his voice, asking them who gave them the right to threaten him. When the red-haired man asks Yaoganwu who he is, he doesn't get involved. Hearing this, Yaoganwu shouts that he is an employee there and is disturbing their business. Moreover, the red-haired man shouts in return, asking Yaoganwu if he should have brought a gift to ask him a question. The man with gray hair stands behind him and puts a hand on his shoulder, saying calm down. He is a newbie, and he has become too irritable after Faker and the crew got defeated. After this, the man with gray hair looking toward Khan says, "Sir, they just need to learn more about this arena," then asks if he and his successor also participate in the competition. Then he asked if he knew more about this girl. Khan answered they only faced each other in the competition. Then Khan asks him how they could know anything about her. Hearing this, Yaoganwu stands there thinking they haven't realized that he is Khan's successor, maybe because he doesn't look like much. However, the man with hair turns, saying to his companion, "Let's go. If they don't know anything, they should ask around some more." As they both leave the smithy, Yaoganwu and Khan stand at the door. Standing in the door, Yaoganwu shows his muscles to them, saying don't they ever return. while Khan stands behind him and says, "Look on the bright side, the competition has become a hot topic." After some time, a customer got there, saying Sir Khan let him check out some items as both Yaoganwu and Khan stood far from the customer. Khan says Yaoganwu, another customer, will be popular recently, so many of them are coming. Khan stands behind Khan, looks toward him, takes the customer to smithy, and smiles, thinking selling his items isn't such a bad idea. However, Khan shows the items that Yaoganwu forged to the customer. Seeing this, Yaoganwu stands there with folded arms, thinking setting up a booth and bargaining with a passing customer is too stressful. Auction houses and cash transaction sites have enormous fees, so he sighs, thinking that when Khan sells them for him, there is no fee to pay. Then he blushed, thinking he could get rich if he kept this up. He suddenly got furious and clenched his teeth, thinking this was just a useless class that only produced normal rated items. This game system is futile. Moreover, in the SA Group headquarters operation team, the Choi Nahi team members showed her the emails one by one. The team member sat in the office before the supercomputer showed the email to Choi Nahi, and then he read that email before the company manager, Choi Nahi. This email was from an anonymous person who wrote that he was a legendary blacksmith and asked why he couldn't create any legendary items. Also, he spent an entire month creating 73 items, not a single one was legendary. Furthermore, he didn't get any unique items either. He only got 3 measly epic items, and then he asks if they are manipulating this. With a tired face, he read that email before her, and she scolded him and stopped him from reading it. Then the team members sitting on his chair turn their heads and look toward manager Choi Nahi asking, but the probabilities should rise as his level increases. Further, he asks why he is acting like this, and Choi Nahi replies that it's simple. Then, setting her glasses, she replies he doesn't know that he has a legendary class, but doesn't know that. Hearing this, the team member sits there with a tired expression, but still 3 epic items amongst 73. Even when using legendary skills, he can see why he thinks they are manipulating the probabilities. However, she replies that's what's crazy about this case. It would make more sense for it to be a bug and manipulation. Choi Nahi thinks that, with his legendary class, he is an absolute icon of misfortune. On the other side, Youngwoo, on his way to college, has a sad-faced sigh and calculates the money he earns from the sale. After figuring this out, he thinks the money he made from 60 weapons and armor. He has made a profit of 1,079 gold, that's 1,294,801. While calculating his profit on the diary, he thinks he has made this much just by crafting for 5 and 6 hours daily. He could make more if he worked all day. Then, he hit his foot on the ground and shouted asking why won't his parents change their minds. Then he thinks if he wants to convince them by showing a proper high income, he will need to sell the ideal dagger. But no one can meet the usage restriction of advanced dagger mastery. After this he sighs, telling himself that since there is no one to use it, he can't sell it on the market now, and in the end, he is going back to the labor office. Meanwhile, as he was on his way, a piece of paper flew in the air and fell on his face. He removed it from his face and started reading it. He was speechless when he read what was written on that page. The greatest capsule room has a lifetime discount of 30% on the capsule room fee. Reading this paper, he surprisingly thinks a lifetime discount is today. This is it, and then he turns to the destination mentioned in that paper. Thinking the fee is 6,001, a 30% discount make it in the morning and afternoon. He will play in the capsule room and at home in the evening today, thinking this place is all he runs so fast. However, he finally arrives at that place, standing outside the building and looking toward the notice billboard, he cheers, thinking about his workplace. Yoganwoo was quite excited, thinking he was bailing the labor office from now on. However, the next day, the day Shin Yoganwoo started working as a full-time blacksmith at Khan's smithy, many people gathered asking for the items that Yoganwoo made. As these items were out of stock, Khan sat before them silently. One of them from the crowd asks Khan if he has more equipment made by the unknown master craftsman. Also, the girl stands there and asks the boy if those items are popular. The boy replies that she has yet to hear the mid-level users can't buy any because they are out of stock. Then pointed toward Khan, who said they are a bit pricey, but their performance is 20% better than that of equipment of the same grade. Moreover, the man stands there and asks Khan where they can meet this master artisan they want to make commissions. Then they request Khan to tell them, and Khan stands there at the counter, scratching his beard, thinking he can't answer them. After this, he turns his head back toward the crafted room and feels thankful. Even when Yaoganwu works by spending all his blood and sweat, there are limited productions, and he wants to wait to spread his name. Therefore, from that day onward, many users gathered to ask him the same question, but they were still waiting to realize that the novice user was hammering items in the back. Was the person they were looking for yet? However, the next day Yaoganwu, with great difficulty, crafts a plate armor and then holds it in his hand. Then, looking toward it, he sighs, and then he lifts it and requests them, saying he is begging them please. Then he thinks he has been playing around 15 hours per day by going to the capsule room during the day. Thanks to that, the amount of items he has been making has doubled, and today is the day of salvation. Then he put that armor plate on the table before him and stared at it, thinking he made this plate armor by following Khan's method word for word. It cost him 483 gold, around over a fifth of his entire asset. This is the most expensive item he has ever made. Standing there looking toward the plate armor, he thinks he spent 20 hours crafting this because he didn't want a normal rating. However, he touches the armor, thinking so please let it be a legendary grade, he is begging them to at least make it a unique grade. He stands there, putting his hands on the plate armor on the table before him. The bright light came out of that armor and spread all around there, and then the notification appeared that very delicate plate armor. It was written on the notification window that this is very light plate armor, and its durability is above 200. Its defense was above 300, and its movement speed was -6%. In the description, it was written that there is a small chance of completely defending against stab attacks, and in the user restriction section, it was reported that it's level 120 plus. Its strength and stamina were above 400, and it is the intermediate heavy armor mastery, and its rating was epic. As soon as Yaoganwu got the last notification, he screamed and scratched his head, abusing them. After some time, he angrily sits on the table, holding his head, repeating this phrase, "It's over." Meanwhile, Khan gets there and comforts him by saying its rating is higher than what he would normally get from his production method. It's impressive. Hearing this, Youngwoo's head up, and with a sad face, he sighed and looked toward Khan, asking how much they could sell this for. Khan's couscous and answers, it is hard to estimate they could put it up for auction and let the knights bid for it. He saw an incredible armor set during the parade, but its quality could have been better than this one. Youngwoo turned his head and looked toward the armor plate, asking if they would auction it, thinking he guessed so since the blacksmith's breath and craftsmanship were used. While creating this armor, its stats are 20% higher than normal, and it even has an additional option. Most knights are around level 180, but armor could still grab their attention at this level of 120. As Yaoganwu was looking toward the armor, a bright light emerged. Khan stood behind him and smiled, saying this was a good opportunity. He will have to go to the castle to sell it, but there is no fee this time, then asks Youngwoo what he thinks. Youngwoo thoughtfully replies if there is no fee, he is in, let's auction it. He has been holed up for a while, so it's about time he headed outside. Knowing this, Khan says that since the auction is in 2 days, he should craft more equipment to sell. Yaoganwu heads to the crafting room and replies alright, he is going to make a legendary grade 1 this time for sure. However, 2 days later, on the day of departure, both Youngwoo and Khan were in the smithy standing there. Khan told him to stay safe and not be too disappointed. It's impressive that he managed to make normal grade items. Youngwoo makes the annoying face stand silently, then Khan extends his hand toward him. Also, he places the badge on his hand and extends his hand toward Youngwoo, saying take this. Only those with this badge can participate in the auction. It will get him exempted from additional appraisals. Youngwoo gets the badge and stares, holding it in his hand, and there, a notification appears before him that he has gained the token of Khan's successor. As he stood there staring at the badge, Khan told him it would be a good experience for him as long as he didn't get his hopes up. After this, Youngwoo turned and took a step. He stops, turns his head, sighs, and then looks toward Khan. He says hope and luck will never be him anywhere. Then, with a disappointed face, he looks toward Khan and says see him soon. However, the purpose of Winston Castle's auction was to offer good equipment to the knights. It was also to find and pinpoint blacksmiths with great skills. Many blacksmiths gathered and crowded in the Winston Castle Annex lobby every year. Hoping to get selected and gain the rights to deliver goods to the Lord, Youngwoo stands there among them, thinking there are so many blacksmiths, both users and NPC. He could try looking for employees there once he inherited the smithy. After some time, the lady holding the paper stood there on the stairs, announced the auction would soon begin, set a minimum bid price, and submitted their items. Youngwoo stands there using his digital skills, and the interface window appears. He touches it, thinking it's about to start. First, he will submit the plate armor, and then the plate armor and the plain gauntlets appear before him on the interface. He also selected it thinking, and this epic gauntlet he managed to make at the last moment. Moreover, this plain gauntlet plane was epic. Its durability, defense, attack speed, and accuracy were good, and its user restriction was above level 120. And its agility was 100+. Then he stood before the interface, scratching his nose, thinking the problem was the minimum bid price. He will only be able to sell them if they are affordable, so ask how high he should set them. Standing there he was thinking, a boy get near him going hand ask his mister if their problem. Youngwoo heads up and looks toward him. The boy waves. His hand says he is Steng, a blacksmith. This looks like his first. He thinks he could help. Youngwoo, looking toward him, thinks he is a user. But where has he heard his name before? Then he replies he can't decide on a minimum bid price. Steng asked him if the teacher who gave them this quest agreed on a price beforehand. Then Steng says they usually make their decisions in advance like this, sharing quest information. However, the interface window appeared there, and it was written that their teacher, Aaron C., the blacksmith Razvan, had given him an errand to complete as his disciple. If he clears the condition, he has to submit Razvan's work to the auction, and he will get 20 gold as a reward. After reading this notification window, Yagenwu asks him if he is not submitting his items but his teacher's items. Steng replies he can't offer his works at the castle's auction. The quality of the items is too high there. Then he shows Youngwoo the sword he crafted, telling him that his teacher's skills are top-notch. Please look at this. This is a level 90 rare grade great sword crafted by his master. Hearing this, Youngwoo, looking toward him, thinks he guesses that normally he needs to complete quests for NPC blacksmiths to gain new production methods. But look at him being so excited at rare items. What a happy kid. Steng excitedly asks Youngwoo if he could look at his master's items as well. Youngwoo, in his mind, abuses him, and then replies no, that's a bit secret. Then he smiled and asked Steng if he could tell him the general bid price of a level 120 defensive equipment. Steng, with a sad face, head down and sigh, replaying he didn't want to. He was curious. For normal grade items, it's generally around 300 golds. Youngwoo, looking toward him, asks what about epic items, and Steng loudly replies, asking if his teacher crafted an amazing epic grade item. Furthermore, even if the option could be better, epic grade items go for 600 golds for gauntlets and maybe around 1800 golds for armor. Youngwoo stands there hearing this, thinking 1800 golds is about 880,000 won and a net gain of 2 million won if he removes the costs. But it's still amazing considering it took him a week in a capsule room. Then he laughed, thinking at this rate, he could even repay his debt of 10 M1. Just goodbye to his debts. After this, Steng moves his arm, thinking of his facial expression, and Youngwoo surprisingly asks him what's wrong. Steng replies nothing. He should set the bid price now. After this, Youngwoo stood there thinking he had submitted the items. All he has to do now is wait, and he is counting on them nights. However, the judge checked and observed all the blacksmith items in the observing room. The lady is holding the contestant please keep their last item for today. The people sitting in the panel, one of the observers on the chair, asked if it was already the last one. There weren't any impressive ones this time. Then, one of them from the panel looking toward the lady stands there and adds his points, saying that only 3 were worth mentioning. After this, an observer says these items only ruin Lady Irene's honor. The other one sits on the chair beside him, adding to his point. This is the countryside so they can do nothing about it. However, the lady stood there pointing toward the great sword, announcing, thankfully, this last item is up to the mark. The blacksmith Razvan's disciple brought this to them. It's a long sword that easily allows magic to flow. Looking toward that great sword, the people stand there loudly and ask Razvan. She says, and then the man stands beside that man who questions the lady excitedly and says, thank goodness they waited this long. However, both of them raise their hands, saying they must buy that one since it's the last item for 1,000 gold. They both start quarreling with each other because they want to buy the same item. The one says he will buy it for 1,000 gold. The other raises his hand, saying stay out of this, he will buy it for 1,100 gold. After this, a woman comes to the lady and says in her ear that if she gives this to her, she will buy this great sword in 1200 gold, and the lady, hearing this, stays silent. After this, the lady announces among the knights, requests them to be calm, and tells them there is an item that was submitted tardily. On the other side, Young Woo falls asleep sitting on the bench while waiting for the result. His eyes were half opened, his mouth was drooling, and he was asleep. Steng shakes him by his shoulder and wakes him from sleep, saying, "Wake up, Youngwoo." However, Yaoganwoo wakes up, and Steng, pointing ahead, smiles and tells him they are announcing the result. Engwoo, taking the tongs, asks if it always takes this long. The lady standing on the stairs holding the paper in hand says the knights have high standards, then she announces a total of 110 were submitted. Unfortunately, only 6 of them were sold. Hearing this, the blacksmith stands there surprisingly and asks what only 6. A blacksmith girl stands there with a sad face despite submitting 7 items. After this, the lady announced Miss Claris's necklace won at 453 golds, Mr. Gree's inner armor at 189 golds. Mr. Piglet's potion is 15 gold per bottle. For Mr. Steng's longsword, it's 19 gold. Hearing this, Steng excitedly cheers up. Then, looking toward Youngwoo, he says his teacher sword had a successful bid. Then he asks Youngwoo if he will be so glad, won't he? Youngwoo looks at him angrily, replies, inviting, and abuses him, and Steng fearfully looks up at him and nod. After his, Youngwoo, looking aside, clenches his teeth, thinking he is a nice guy and sold for a high price. He is so jealous. Moreover, the lady stands there holding the paper announcement, and lastly, Mr. Youngwoo is there. Youngwoo stands there and surprisingly replies that it's him. Then the lady pointed ahead and said the administrator wished to see him. Please follow her. Hearing this, Youngwoo gets confused and points toward himself, asking him why, while Steng stands aside, pats his shoulder, and smiles, saying, Youngwoo follows her. He is in for a good surprise. Youngwoo looked toward him, asked a good surprise, then the lady took him to the administrator's office. There he entered and looked around thinking this is the administrator's office, the castle interior is so fancy. The lady entered there and informed the administrator that she had brought him Mr. Youngwoo. The administrator sat there on his chair checking Youngwoo's items. While checking the items he asks if is he Youngwoo, take a seat, he has masterfully copied Khan's handiwork. It's impressive considering his age. Youngwoo sits there on the chair before him, and the lady servant serves him the tea. As the lady was serving him the tea, the administrator sat before him and said the heroic blacksmith had heard the rumors about him that had been spreading in Winston. After this, the administrator sitting on his chair looking toward Youngwoo says an extreme personality paired with amazing skills. Khan has coached him magnificently. Hearing this, Youngwoo takes a sip of tea thinking this is all due to his skill, not him. However, the administrator sitting there puts his both arms on the table before him and looks toward Youngwoo saying they will buy his items for 5,500 gold. And one more thing, he would like him to supply their soldier with his equipment. Hearing this, Youngwoo gets shocked and surprisingly looks toward the administrator holding the cup of tea in his hand. His mouth started watering after listening about that much gold and money. Then sitting there he was about to be mad thinking about this much money. Then he put his hand on his ears and stuck out his tongue thinking 5,500 golds, that's 600,001. That's the income he gets by working at the labor office for 73 days. He earned that in just a single week. Furthermore, calm down, there is something more important than the winning bid. Then he sighs and gets normal.